Hey, second chair leaders, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that I believe truly is the key to unlocking your full potential as a second chair leader. If you've ever felt stuck, if you've ever felt overlooked or frustrated in your role, this episode is for you. I want to start off by asking you this. Are you tired of being in the shadows, wishing you could make a bigger impact? Or maybe you're navigating a tough dynamic with your senior leader, and quite honestly, you're feeling like your voice doesn't even matter. Well, let me tell you, you have more influence than you think. And today we're going to explore directly and exactly how to harness that influence that you have and lead up with excellence. But before we jump into the practical strategies today, I have to be raw with you. Leading up is not easy. It's going to require a new way of thinking, a different approach, and some tough, real conversation. So let's dive in and see what it takes to lead up and thrive in the second chair. The reality is this: many second chair leaders feel like they're in the shadows. You're working hard behind the scenes. You're pushing initiatives forward. You're leading teams and helping shape the vision. But sometimes, and quite often, it feels like nobody sees your work, especially the senior leader, your pastor. You know, being overlooked can sting. And in ministry, it's even more personal. You're not just leading a team. You're giving your heart. You're investing spiritually, and still sometimes you feel invisible. Well, here's the raw truth. Senior pastors are often so overwhelmed. They have 1,000 things going, pulling them in different directions. Things like sermon prep, counseling, vision casting, budgets, meetings with board members, and the list goes on and on. And it's easy for them to focus on the bigger picture and unintentionally miss the contributions of their second chair leader. But that doesn't change the fact that feeling overlooked can erode your sense of value and worth as a leader. For a second chair leader, this pain point, it runs deep because church work is more than a job. It is a calling. And when your calling feels unnoticed, it can lead to burnout. It can lead to frustration. And if we're not careful, second chair leaders, bitterness. But here's the hard reality. Being noticed isn't the goal, leader. Leading well is the goal. So how do you manage this in the church world? Well, first, you've got to understand that influence isn't always about being seen. In the church context, influence is about faithfulness, and faithfulness often happens in the unseen spaces. You might be making decisions that impact the entire church, but if your senior leader isn't recognize your contributions, that doesn't mean that you're not valuable. Your faithfulness to your role is noticed by God, even when it's missed by people. And then secondly, visibility matters, but it is not everything. You can't just wait for your senior leader to notice you. Sometimes you have to be your biggest advocate, your biggest cheerleader for your work in a way that is both humble and it's also direct. So in a church setting, this doesn't mean you're bragging or seeking the spotlight. It means that you're showing how your work aligns with the vision of the church and how it's contributing to the big picture, the mission. And then thirdly, I want to talk about relational proximity. It plays a huge role in being noticed. If your senior leader only sees you as the person who gets tasks done, they might not really see the full extent of your leadership. So building relational equity with your senior leader, it means more than just working hard. It means seeking opportunities to connect on a more personal level, making sure that they understand your heart for the ministry and the ways you're carrying the load with them. But here's the rawest truth of all. Sometimes you'll never be fully seen, and that's okay. In ministry, the recognition you're really working for isn't from people, it is from God. So keep doing the work, second chair leader. Keep being faithful and trust that in due time, your faithfulness will be rewarded, whether it's noticed by your senior leader or not. I want you to check this out for a sec. Let's talk about David. You all know the story. The future king of Israel was the youngest of his brothers, and he spent most of his days doing what? Tending to the sheep. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king, David, he was totally overlooked. Anybody ever been there before? He was overlooked by his own family. See, Samuel thought that David's older brothers were the ones, but God had a different perspective. He said, the Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Aren't you thankful for that? If you don't remember the story, go to 1 Samuel chapter 16. But it wasn't until Samuel asked if there were any other sons that David was called in from the fields and anointed as king. So here's the scoop for you as a second chair leader. Even when you're grinding away and it feels like nobody notices, I want you to remember this. God sees your heart. Your faithfulness and those behind the scenes moments is shaping you for something greater. Your dedication, it's not in vain. It's setting the stage for what's next. So leader, keep pushing, because what matters most is that you are being faithful in the obscure places. Now I want us to shift some gears here and talk about something that every second chair leader will face at some point, and it's this right here: disagreements with your senior leader. We all have different perspectives, right? And in church leadership specifically, those disagreements can feel personal because what we're talking about is we're talking about the mission of our church. We're talking about the values of our church and the ultimate direction of the church. So how do you handle those moments where you don't see eye to eye? So how do you honor your senior leader while still standing up for what you believe in? I want us to dive in right now in the art of disagreeing without dishonoring. This is the time for you to take out your pen and paper and let's write some notes here. Disagreements in the church, they can get tricky. You know, whether it's about ministry, philosophy, or a decision regarding the direction of the new program, or even something seemingly minor like worship set list. Conflicts between second chair leaders and senior leaders are bound to happen. I got a lot of stories I could tell about that, but let's be honest. Disagreements in ministry aren't just about differences in opinion. They're often tied to deep-seated convictions, deep-seated values, and a genuine belief that what's best for the church. So in the church world, a disagreement with your senior leader can feel especially personal. You know, after all, you're not just working for them, you're working alongside them in spiritual matters, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow. So when you have a conviction about something and your senior leader doesn't see it the same way, it can feel like they're dismissing your calling or minimizing your input. And that's hard to swallow. But here's the raw truth. You ready? Disagreements are normal and healthy if handled in the right way. Okay, the church is full of people, and anytime people are involved, there will be friction. There will always be friction. The question is how do you disagree well without undermining your leader's authority or damaging the unity of the church? First, take the notes here. You need to understand the principle of disagreeing without dishonoring. In the church, honor is critical. Your senior leader has been placed in their role by God and deserves respect even when you don't see eye to eye. I'm about to preach because this is really good. This means you never publicly challenge or undermine them, because honor doesn't mean you agree with everything, but it does mean your approach disagreements with humility. You approach disagreements with a willingness to listen. And then secondly, timing is everything. A disagreement aired at the wrong time can do more damage than good. So if you have a significant concern, leader, don't bring it up right in front of them or before service or during a busy season in the church. Choose a time where you can sit down with your senior leader privately, away from the pressure of immediate tasks, and have an honest, quiet conversation. And then third, you need to lead with solutions, not complaints. In the church world, senior leaders are bombarded with problems every day, emails that you don't know about. They don't need another issue dropped in their lap without a solution in mind. So if you disagree with the decision, bring an alternative idea that solves the problem while aligning with the church's visions. And then lastly, you need to be ready to submit even when you don't agree. This is the hardest part. There will be times when you believe you're right, but your senior leader has the final say. In those moments, submission is not weakness. It is strength. It is recognition that God works through authority, even when we don't fully understand the decision. Leading up through disagreements is about maturity. It's about laying down your ego for the sake of unity and trusting that God can work even in the decisions you don't fully agree with. I want us to go to Acts 15. Paul and Barnabas, they hit a major snag over whether to bring John Mark on their next journey. They were at odds, but rather than letting it break them, they chose a different path. Both continuing to spread the message of Jesus in their own way. So here's the takeaway from all of this. Disagreements don't have to drive a wedge between you and your senior leader. You need to handle them with respect, with a clear head. Take a breath, breathe. Don't challenge them or undermine them publicly. Keep it private and professional. Approach these moments with a mindset of collaboration. Bring solutions. And remember that even when you don't agree, you can still move the mission forward. All right, here's a big one. Feeling like you have the responsibility for ministry, but not the authority to make decisions. Have you ever been there before? Yes, we've all been there. You're leading teams, you're developing strategies, but every decision needs approval. And it feels like you're hitting a wall. But here is the honest truth, second chair leader. You don't need a title to lead. And there's a way to build influence even when you don't have all the authority that you want and think you should have, right? So let's break down how you can lead effectively even when you don't have the final say, and that final say isn't yours. I want us to talk about in the church world today, one of the most common frustrations for second chair leaders is having the responsibility for ministry or area of ministry without the authority to make key decisions. I ask myself, are you tasked with leading a team, developing strategies, and executing programs? But when it comes to make a decision, you have to get approval from your senior leader. It feels like trying to steer a ship while someone else controls the rudder. I know this can be especially frustrating, especially in smaller churches where resources are limited and the chain of command is tight. Senior leaders, especially in smaller congregations, are often overextended. You should pray for them right now. So they hold on tightly to decision-making authority. But here's the truth. Without the proper delegation of authority, ministry leaders are set up to fail. Yeah, take that note. If you're constantly waiting on approval or feedback, it can slow down momentum, demoralize your team, and create this bottleneck in ministry. Some of us are very familiar with that. The church world can be complex because senior leaders often struggle to release control. They may fear that things won't be done their way or worry that delegating authority could lead to mistakes. But the reality is that by not releasing decision-making power, they risk burning out their second chair leaders, and ultimately the mission of the church suffers. So as a second chair leader, you can't wait around hoping for authority to fall into your lap. You need to have intentional conversations about your role and the level of decision-making you are empowered to make. One of the best ways to approach this is by asking clear questions. Questions like this: what decisions am I fully empowered to make without your approval, and what requires your input? Establishing these type of healthy boundaries will prevent frustration on both sides for you and your senior leader. Even if you don't have full authority, there are still ways to lead effectively. One of the most powerful tools you have is this: it's influence. So leading up well means mastering the art of persuasion. If you can align your ideas with the senior leader's vision and values, you're more likely to gain their trust and approval. For example, instead of saying, "This is what I want to do," frame it with, "This aligns with your vision for the church, and here's how it would work." You see the difference there? Leading without full authority requires patience, it requires humility and creativity. But here's the hard reality: you're not always going to get the authority you want. In those moments, you have a choice to make, and your leadership will be tested. Will you continue to push forward, making the most of what you can do, or will you shrink back in frustration? which I've done that. And I think the best second chair leaders thrive in the tension between responsibility and authority. Second chair leaders, we find ways to lead within our limits while building trust and proving ourselves capable of handling more. I want us to think about the story of Nehemiah. He was what? He was a cupbearer to the Persian king, not exactly in a position of power in Jerusalem, but he saw the need. He took action and rebuilt the city walls, despite not having formal authority. He didn't wait around. He made things happen with the influence he had. So here's the deal, thinking about Nehemiah. Even if you're not making all the big calls, you've got power where you are right now. Second chair leader, you need to master the art of influencing without full authority. So align your ideas with the vision of your senior leader. Build trust and keep moving forward. It's about making the most of what you have and proving that you're capable of handling more. And as we wrap up today's episode, it's been a great episode. I love talking about this. I'm so passionate about this. I want to leave you with this thought. Okay, you ready for it? Leading up is not about pushing your agenda or fighting for recognition. It's about influence. You're going to hear me talk about influence a lot. It's about serving with excellence, even when no one is watching, and trusting that your impact goes far beyond what's visible. Yes, there will absolutely be frustrations. And yes, there will be moments when you feel overlooked and you feel powerless. But, y'all ready for this? The best second chair leaders are those who lead faithfully, whether they're in the spotlight or behind the scenes. So go out there, lead with humility, lead with boldness, and remember, you are making a difference even when it's hard to see.